Yeah, thank you for allowing me to testify today and take up an extremely important bill in the Upper Peninsula, but as well as throughout the entire state of Michigan. House Bill 4227 would create a committee on Michigan's future mining, is an appointed committee only, appointed by the governor, consisting of 15 positions. Those positions are one member of the local steelworkers organization of labor, one member from the ferrous or iron mining industry, one member for a metallic non-ferrous mining industry, a representative from the aggregate mining industry, so sand, gravel, granite, two members each representing an environmental nonprofit organization that deals with mining. We also have a member of our Native American tribes, and an amendment we made in the House puts a member of local township that has a mining operation within it. The other things, or the other positions that we have put in, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, DEGL, the Department of Natural Resources, as well as one position appointed by the state senator for which a metallic and non-metallic mine exists, as well as one position appointed by the state representative in which a metallic and non-metallic mine exists. So where did this bill idea come from? In 2015, we were facing the idling of the Empire Mine. And what we've known about our ore reservation in the UP is that we're not out of ore. For what we know with recent exploration, we have well over 100 years left of ore. In 2008, we were set to expand the Empire Mine and never made it to that point, to the point in 2015 where we were idling our mine and Minnesota was reopening theirs. And this caused concern for me. I was a local city commissioner at the time, but grew up in the Marquette area with the mines basically in my backyard, and knowing the jobs they provide and the economic impact. When both our Tilden and Empire mines are up and running, it's about $1 billion industry a year. And so to have 240 roughly $1 million worth of jobs just in the iron industry, I couldn't possibly try and pull another industry in that could make that up if we lost it. So a group of us got together. We pulled in former Senator Mike Prusi. We pulled in former Representative Steve Adamini, who was instrumental in helping the mines during his tenure here. And we met with the industry leaders and said, what did we do wrong? And the first thing that they told us is that mining really is probably the most capital-intensive industry. It's long planning, long-term decision-making. So if something goes wrong and you don't plan right, to make a shift 2 years in, 5 years in, 10 years in, is nearly impossible. What you're doing is you're looking at the lifespan of a contract to a pellet buyer, such as your industry down here that supply our car industry. And it's about a 20 to 30 year deal. So when decisions are made, they're not made lightly. And if you miss opportunities, those opportunities can be gone for decades. So we organized a small group and we thought, let's look at what Minnesota did. And that's really where this bill came from. Believe it or not, even being from the UP, I was not always sure that we should keep mining. And it wasn't until I met Dr. Stephen Kessler, who really posed the question to me during a lecture, that if you don't want mining here where the minerals are, do you have a right to demand that those minerals you use every day be mined elsewhere? And this really was a turning point for me back in 2011 when I heard him speak. And you'll hear a little bit more from him today. He did come and testify during the House Natural Resources Committee. As we mentioned, Michigan is a state rich in ferrous and non-ferrous minerals and aggregates. It's one of the things that sets us apart from other Midwest states. Every county has some form of an aggregate or ferrous or non-ferrous mine in it. So the per capita consumption of minerals, the way that they average it out per person, it comes out to about 40,000 pounds per year. And they take in buildings, roads, everything we use in our everyday lives. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have an insulin pump attached to me, and it involves copper and many other consumption of minerals to run that every day. We always come back to the question, is it safe? And knowing that there's a push-pull, we just saw it taking up the previous resolution. I think there's a lot of mistrust in mining. I think mining gets a bad name. There's no way to make it pretty. It's an extraction industry. But the good thing is that we have more than 36 federal environmental laws and regulations covering all aspects of it. And for those of you that know a little bit about our history with mining, back in 2006, I think it was, 4, we passed Part 632, which actually regulates our metallic mining, and that was a unanimous vote, both in the House and the Senate, both parties. We had environmental groups at the table that came and said, you know, if we're gonna have mining, these laws really are the most stringent. Some of those federal laws that we deal with every day here in Lansing regarding mining and other environmental activities, the National Environmental Policy Act, Federal Land Policy and Management Act, Clean Air Act, Federal Water Pollution Control Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, Toxic Substance Control Act, Energy Planning and Community Right to Know Act, Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, Rivers and Harbors Act, among others. So really what we're trying to do with this committee, and it's a short-lived 2-year committee that has a sunset, is to improve coordination among stakeholders because it's necessary to really get, I guess, a future roadmap and strategic plan underway in Michigan. Michigan does not have a direct reduced iron pellet, and this is where the 21st century in iron mining is going. So these pellets can be blended to mix with recycled steel. Minnesota can do that. We can't do that right now. So this is setting us behind when we're shifting from the blast furnace over to the electric arc furnaces for recycling. So the purpose of the bill, like Minnesota passed in 2004, is to balance the short and long-term needs of the industry. They came up with 2 reports, again, mostly industry-oriented, to kind of take that 30,000-foot view of what do we need. And with the shortest term limits in the United States right now, Michigan really is at a disadvantage when there's so much turnover between members, the governor's office, and sometimes it's just the departments carrying on that knowledge. And so to get a plan like they have, you have some of those packets. You can kind of look at the types of strategies and the things they focused on. Legislative and government policies, taxation. You know, in Minnesota, they have an environmental legacy fund. There's no question that we haven't dealt with that in Michigan. I think a lot of what scares people is that from our mining decades and centuries ago, we still do have a lot of contamination we need to deal with. In Minnesota, they took 25 cents per tonnage that was produced and put it into a fund that can go back and match grants to environmental groups, research at universities, and even the industry to look at ways to mitigate that and clean it up. So environmental quality, applied research. Minnesota also takes, I believe it's even less than a quarter, and puts it in a research fund so that their public universities have access to this. And as long as they match half of whatever grant or research they want to do, the state is actually a partner with them in looking at how do we create the new pellet that can be melted with recycled steel? How do we go forward and monitor and put in place metallic mining? So there's a partnership there that really has strengthened their industry. And again, when companies look at, do I reinvest in Michigan or Minnesota, there's a lot more that they can gain in Minnesota. An example of those taxes, how they take them out, what they're used for in Minnesota. And one thing I would like to point out right now is the stamp sands. You may have heard of that that phrase, but it is a legacy left over from the previous mining, from the stamp mills, mostly in the Keweenaw, and you can see where all the mines are located on the map. It's a dark gray color, it's black, and a lot of it was stored where you kind of see the rainbow color near Game, Michigan. And even though it looks like a natural aggregate, it is a mining waste, and it's been washing into Lake Superior more and more, covering up the spawning beds for whitefish. And this is something that we are doing dredging for it. It was passed last session as a supplemental, but we also know that dredging can only do so much before it washes back in. Luckily, one of the industry leaders in Ontonagon looked at using an old processing mill to recycle the future stamp sands. And you can see there that from those stamp sands, when they process it, they've been able to produce copper from it. Again, just talking about what Minnesota does for their Economic Development Fund. And here's a look at their distribution of how they deal with their taxes. A lot of it goes locally, but a lot of it does go into funds that continue to support mining. The University of Minnesota Duluth is the main university that does a lot of their research. And really their mission, which I believe that we could do here in Michigan, is to deliver solutions to balance the economy, resources, and the environment. I think oftentimes many of us get asked to choose either or. You know, it's either gonna be we're gonna protect the environment or we're gonna have jobs. They've figured out how to do both, and I think this committee can help with that in Michigan. So Michigan Tech does have an academic research organization and arm of it that's actually in their mining and chemical engineering department. But the problem is right now other states actually hire Michigan Tech to do research and contribute matching funds specific for mining, and Michigan does not. So Minnesota is hiring our researchers at Michigan Tech to do studies for them. Other states are using Michigan Tech as well, but right now Michigan does not contribute anything back to help with our own mining industry. But they're doing some pretty cool things. One of the recent studies they're doing are how do we use more natural substances like phosphorus to purify iron ore rather than chemicals. They're also one of 2 major grant holders in how do we recycle lithium-ion batteries. So do we even have a need for mining in Michigan? Do we have as many mining jobs as other states? When we look at Minnesota, we're not that far behind. But when we look at our GDP, we're actually closer than the amount of jobs comparing them. As I mentioned with our iron mines, with Cliffs, you could kind of see the economic impact. That's just the Tilden mine. And this is a combined sheet with the Tilden and Empire mine to show you the economic impact and what we've lost with the idling of the Empire. Eagle Mine, you're going to hear from Matt Johnson, and he'll probably talk a little bit about how much they pay in taxes. It's not just the severance taxes, as well as the DNR trust fund and everything else that they pay into. But when you look at the amount of money that they've spent in Michigan for one metallic mine already, it's about $360 million, which is a huge investment for the Upper Peninsula. You can kind of see where all of that money goes. I talked a little bit about the either-or dilemma. There was a petition to not reopen the Empire Mine in Michigan. We pulled this off the internet. One, that is not a picture of the Empire Mine. Two, most of the people that opposed the mine did not live in Michigan. So to change that, really, I think this bill can do many things, but also start the conversation around mining's future. We know that medical is used in, or metal is used in medical devices for open heart surgery. Nitinol is a new malleable yet strong nickel titanium alloy that allows stents to be used. For opioid and chronic pain, Medtronic is actually doing spinal cord stimulation, so it's an effective non-opioid treatment. And for someone like myself, continuous glucose monitors, I actually have a little chip, a computer chip that reads my blood sugar about every 10 minutes and signals it back to my insulin pump. So I don't have to use test strips like you see there. Lastly, before we get to the video, urban mining. This is something that I think I've heard environmentalists want, so let's see if we can do it. What do we do with mining waste? What do we do with our computers, cell phones, and other electronic devices? I think this is a big win. I think we could coordinate with a lot of industry in Lower Michigan and really get to a place where we all agree. So I'm just going to finish up with a quick video with Dr. Stephen Kessler.
Just a little bit of proof that I might belong here, since I'm not associated with the right university at the moment. There's a couple of books up there, covers on the screen. I've taught at University of Michigan for about 40 years, and you can see on the left a book called Mineral Resources, Economics, and the Environment, which we use as a text, is used all over the world. It's about global mineral resources. And Great Lakes Rocks, which talks about 4 billion years of geologic history in the Great Lakes region, including the mineral deposits. So my view on this whole thing is much longer term than what you've had. It's also a little bit broader in terms of the state, and I want to emphasize that to you. Take a look at this skyline. You might recognize it. Everything in that picture except the Detroit River had to come out of the ground. Everything. If it can't be grown, it has to be mined. Mining is critically important to a modern lifestyle. Every year, you personally are responsible for the removal of 37,000 pounds of material from the earth to support your own personal lifestyle. Your cell phone has 70 elements in it. Every one of them had to be dug out of the ground. So you can't escape it. You're in this. All right, so you want to recycle. You don't want to mine. We are the best recycler in the world, or among them here in the United States, and we can do 25% when we're just doing super for a few elements. Usually it's less than 10%. So we have to mine to get new stuff. But even if we did 100%, look at copper consumption. You can't see it, but on the bottom, that's 1900 on the left up to the present. That's world copper consumption. There are a lot of people in the world, including people in Michigan, who are advancing their standard of living and want more stuff. So even with perfect recycling, we're going to have to produce more. Mining is absolutely here to stay forever. Now, this shows you what we've done in the state in terms of hard minerals. The value of production, about 2.6 billion years. That's in 2013, the last year for which we have numbers. Number 9 in the 50 states. The red squares are aggregate operations, gravel, sand and gravel, crushed stone, that sort of thing. They're all over the state. Notice that we're not just talking the UP here. The stars are mining operations of various types, and let me just show you what some of those are. This will be real fast. Here's some of the sand operations. Now, these are past and present. Here are operations that remove limestone, which makes cement. We're a big cement producer. Salt, gypsum, potash, magnesium, bromine, sulfur. You can even go into a salt mine under Detroit. Keweenaw copper, nothing going on right now, but $60 billion in today's value, and there's a lot of copper left in the ground there. And as you know, we already heard, we're one of the largest iron mining regions in the world. We're small in relation to the Mesabi Range, and we've got to keep fighting Minnesota. We don't want them to take over. And finally, there's base metal mines. We've heard a little bit about the Eagle Mine, which is an excellent operation. The Back 40, you may be aware of, is a prospect that's being evaluated. I want to close by reminding you, as has been pointed out, mines are exhausted. Now, a lot of people say, well, if we're going to exhaust it, why don't we mine it at all? Well, I ask you, if you're going to have to eat dinner because your lunch runs out, why are you even eating lunch? I mean, it's an illogical line of thinking. Now, we have to find new deposits. Mineral exploration is a very difficult business. Look at the guy on the bottom. He put everything into it, and he just quit when his money and energy ran out. The guy on the top might make it. I don't know, but it's a long-term business. We are in it for the long term. We should be thinking generations. We have to keep the mining industry going. And in order to do that, there are a few suggestions. But just notice that map on the right with the green areas. We're a unique state in many senses. We're very large, and we have a lot of publicly controlled land, which is easy access for mineral exploration and that sort of thing. So we're likely to be doing it far into the future. Thank you very much.